Alright, so hey, what's going on everyone? Tommy here. Welcome back to another video. Today we're gonna be watching some more animated videos.
The ones that look like they don't shower and their clothes are always torn or ripped. They wear old, shabby shoes that look just a little too small for their feet. At my school, I was that kid. And don't think for a second that I wasn't reminded of it every 2 minutes. Not only was I that kid who looked like she'd gotten her clothes from a dumpster, I was also the nerd. Tough, right? Before I continue, make sure you hit those like and subscribe buttons. We appreciate it. As a nerdy kid, what do you think my favorite school event was? If you guessed
like
science
and
fair,
subscribe
you're absolutely right.
and join my Discord server. The link is gonna be down below in the description.
But my sophomore year, it was different because I felt strongly about what I had made.
And the winner is...
We heard on the intercom.
Diana!
I jumped from where I was sitting and celebrated. Do you want to know what I won with? Let me tell you. I knew I had to really bring it to this science fair if I wanted to beat the new girl. So I completely outdid myself. I was reading a comic book when I came up with the idea X-ray vision glasses. I stayed up way past my bedtime many nights to get them just right. After I won, I felt like I could do so much more. I told my parents I was going on a walk after dinner and walked to the nearest gas station. On the counter, there were rolls of scratcher lottery tickets. I put my glasses on and looked at them. I bought a chocolate bar and the winning scratcher. My glasses allowed me to see the ticket with the jackpot underneath. I went home, scratched it in front of my parents as they told me off for wasting money. Oh, I forgot to tell you. My parents weren't broke. They were just cheapskates. Anyways, imagine the look on their faces when the ticket said I had just won $1 million. Of course, this went on for a very long time. My parents made it a routine that after picking me up from school, we would go buy any winning scratchers we found. Our fortune was growing day by day, each day more than the one before. Now I'm a billionaire, 8 years after winning that high school science fair. I'm in my early 20s. I should have had a booming social life, but I was lonely. The day my life began to change, I was alone in one of my mansions. I was simply walking around the empty house when my doorbell rang. I looked at the window and saw it was pouring rain. Who could it be? I thought. I jogged to the door, grabbing the baseball bat I had next to it, and opened the door a little. On my porch, I saw a young man. He looked my age. He was dripping from the rain. His clothes were soaked. Hi, my car broke down. Do you mind if I use your phone? The guy asked. I reluctantly let him in and led him to the telephone. He looked familiar. I felt like I'd seen him before, which was slightly comforting. He came back into the living room and thanked me for letting him use the phone. I know it's a lot to ask, but is there any way I can stay here for the night? He asked, and he was right. It was a lot. You can lock me in a room with only a mattress or something. I don't mind, he joked. I told him I didn't even know him, so he introduced himself as Enzo. I'm Diana, I said. I took him to my guest house. I had some clothes there that would fit him, so I let him take a shower and went back to the living room to watch my movie, but keeping my eye on the door of the guest house to make sure he didn't try to murder me. He came back a few minutes later, rubbing his hair with a towel. Some house you got here, he said. Reminds me of an old classmate of mine. She was a nerd, but now she's loaded. He then stopped and looked at me with wide eyes. Diana? He gasped. Then he started naming almost everyone I went to high school with, and that's when it hit me. The man in front of me went to my school. He was friends with the most popular guy, the one that made fun of me nonstop. When I pointed that out, Enzo's smile dropped, and he looked kind of sad. He sat down on my couch with me and apologized for himself and his friends. We talked for a while and shared the takeout I had ordered. Eventually, I thought to ask the question I should have asked as soon as he walked in through the door. So how'd you end up in the middle of nowhere, was my question. He explained that he was on his way home from being abroad on a humanitarian mission on an island. He talked about how beautiful it was, how amazing it felt to help people, and how he wished more people did it. I hung on his every word. Something about that island sounded magical. The way he described it really made me want to go. That night, I tossed and turned. I couldn't sleep a wink. I finally got out of bed in the morning to the smell of waffles. Enzo had made himself comfortable in the kitchen. The second I sat down, I decisively said, I want you to take me to the island. He put a waffle in front of me and he talked about why I wanted to go. And I told him why. He thought wanting to help people was more than a good enough reason, so we made plans. 2 days later, I met him at the airport. I started walking in the direction of my private plane, but he grabbed my elbow and led me somewhere else. No way I'm getting on that, I said. He wanted me to hop on the rusty, tiny little plane. I was surprised one of the wings didn't fall off. You got it, he said. It's the island's own plane. He convinced me by saying he had been on it many, many times. When we arrived, the landing was so rough I was surprised that my seatbelt didn't snap. Enzo had this old man pick us up from the tiny airport in a rusty old car. I was starting to see a pattern in everything that belonged to this island. When we got to the town where everyone lived, a whole bunch of people came running towards us. Enzo had people all over him, kids trying to get on his shoulders and old people trying to give him food. He then told them I was there to help out, and they all crowded me instead. I didn't appreciate the kids or the old people or their weird-looking food. They were all too touchy. I was getting claustrophobic, and I couldn't see a road not made of dirt anywhere. I tried to get help from Enzo with all these people, but he was off somewhere else talking to this little old lady. They seemed to be whispering gravely. She looked pretty serious. I managed to get the people to leave me alone, after which I went to Enzo, and he took me to where I'd be staying. I'm gonna be honest with you, I was panicking. I had never been somewhere so poor. The young girl who wore torn clothes wasn't in me anymore. I was used to a different lifestyle. Everything felt dirty. The food looked unappetizing. I was losing my mind. Enzo wasn't helping at all. He kept asking me where I got my money from, how I got so rich, and how much I'd be giving to the town. Now that we were here, all he talked about was money, and it was driving me nuts. I wish I never let you in my house. I finally snapped at him. We were in the little house we were staying at. Wow, I should have expected Miss Billionaire to not care about other people. You're so selfish. He snapped back. I demanded to know how I was selfish, which triggered a rant. He started going on about how the way I made money was selfish, that I was cheating and wasn't even willing to help those in need. Do you have any idea what it feels like to be in a place like this, knowing you're off in one of your mansions spending money left and right? I'm from here. This is my home. He screamed at me. He was so angry, he had turned red. God, all I wanted was for you to spend your big bucks on people who need it. Now I blew it. He sat down on a chair and rubbed his face. I stormed out of the house and went for a walk. I wanted to kick everything I saw. The roads were dirty, but I noticed there were no trash bins on them. I saw a few fishermen carrying only a few fish, but when I walked down to the marina, I noticed they only had one small boat, and their nets were all torn. I realized something. There was so much potential for the island. I ran back to the little cabin to talk to Enzo, but he was gone. He left a sarcastic note saying he'd hope I'd enjoy my time there. I crumpled it up and threw it elsewhere. I then climbed onto my roof to try to get a signal on my phone. When I did, I called my mom. Not a day later, she was there telling me off. My mom had shown up with her many trucks of luggage and employees. See, I had picked more humble attire for my trip here, but my mom heard island and decided to go all out. When we were alone, she sat me down and said, "What is this about you wanting to sponsor this place?" I explained that the island was great, full of hardworking people. My mom didn't believe it. We were arguing when there was a knock on my door. Some kids from the town came to deliver food. I thanked them and gave them some sweets I had bought, then turned at my mom with a beaming smile, but she just asked, "Are you really going to eat that?" I yelled at her for being insensitive, but she just stormed out saying she needed some fresh air. I didn't want to talk to her, but then I felt bad that she was alone, and the clouds were looking pretty dark. I ended up running out the door to look for her. As I ran down a path looking for my mom, it started pouring rain, and the wind picked up. I was worried the trees were about to start tipping over when I heard a loud crash and a scream further down the path. I saw my mom almost fainting at the tree that must have fallen right in front of her. "Mom!" I screamed out. She ran towards me and we hugged. We were scared to move an inch to either side of the road when a little kid came from the bushes. He grabbed my hand and pulled me and my mom into the forest. He took us behind a small house. There was a sort of shed made of metal up against the mountain. He knocked on it and a little door opened. We stepped in and found at least 6 people in there. My mom was impressed by the shed. It actually felt safe. She asked who had built it and a woman stood up from the floor. She explained that a bunch of metal wound up on the beach and she used it to build this weatherproof shed for her and her kids. My mom was so impressed. She kept asking the woman questions while I played with the kids. As soon as the storm passed, we said thank you to our hosts and walked home while talking. "I think I see what you mean," started my mom. "These really are good people. I guess they were dealt a bad hand. So you'll help me with them?" I asked, full of hope. "Yes, I think I will." She smiled at me. We sat in my living room for days after that, planning everything that we were going to do. A year passed. I left my mom at the house, taking forever to get ready as always, but I had been ready for hours. We were finally inaugurating the new marina. I had the docks redone and bought new boats for the fishermen, equipped with the best gear. I was walking down through the town when I saw a face I hadn't seen in a while. Enzo. He was standing wide-eyed on the now pavemented street. He had had 2 suitcases with him. He then saw me and walked towards me, struggling with what to say. "What do you think?" I asked him. After a year, of course I wasn't angry anymore. "I made a few changes, but everyone seems happy," I said excitedly. I was proud of the place. The streets were now made of pavement. There were streetlights powered by windmills and trash cans everywhere to keep the streets clean. I had completely renovated the place. "I'm speechless," said Enzo. I took him by the elbow, the same way he did to me that day at the airport, and led him down to the marina. The sun was about to set. There was a large red ribbon separating the crowd from the sea. I was handed these huge scissors, which I cut the ribbon with, and everyone ran down to see the new boats. "I think I might stick around," Enzo said as we watched the crowd run around excited. "If you don't mind, of course." "Well, I definitely don't need your help with anything," I joked, "but I think I can find somewhere for you to stay," I said. We then stood in silence looking at the sunset. We were standing in a place that we both loved so much.
Yeah, that's what's wrong.
I've always wanted to be a silhouette artist, but buying all those colors and brushes are so expensive.
A few months ago, I lived the normal life of an average teen. You know, get up, go to school, do homework, chase my little sister out of my room, normal things. Until that one event that turned my entire life upside down. Hi, my name is Gary. Do not forget to like this video, hit that subscribe button, and tap on that notification bell. If you do, your secret admirer will call you today. My dad died a few months ago, and it was extremely rough on all of us, me, my sister, and my mom. My father was the main breadwinner of the home, so when my mother got the opportunity to start a new teaching job at a small village called Las Cuevas, she grabbed the chance. We packed up all our belongings and moved. After we had settled in a few days, I went to my mom. "Hey, Mom, would you be okay if I took my camera out and did a little exploring?" My mom smiled and said, "Sure, just be careful." I waved goodbye to her and my little sister, who was watching the TV. I was so deep in thought that I did not realize that I had walked into a small forested area. I stopped and thought, maybe I should go back, but I felt as though I needed to keep going to see where the path led. Along the way, I took pictures of squirrels, birds, and butterflies. It was not long before I came upon a small logged cottage. The cottage was entwined with vines and wildflowers. I approached the cottage with caution while snapping a few shots with my camera. I pressed my hand against the dusty window and peered inside. Cobwebs and dust lined the walls and wooden furniture of the cottage. I was about to turn back when my eyes caught the glimmer of something on the wooden table. "Is that a camera?" I asked myself aloud. I knew that what I was about to do was a mistake and was also illegal. But hey, I'm a teenager, and we make mistakes sometimes. I walked around the cottage to see if there was any way to sneak in. I found a little opening to the back of the cottage where one of the logs had gotten loose. I looked around to make sure no one was coming, then slid into the cottage unnoticed. I dusted away the cobwebs from my face and clothing before heading towards the table. I picked up the camera. I wonder who this belongs to. The camera was small, black, and surprisingly clean. I turned it over and saw a small engraved image on it. "It must be the logo of the company that created the camera," I mumbled as I passed my fingers along it. I've never seen this logo before. On the table next to the camera were 3 packs of film. Each pack held 8 films. I grabbed them up and pushed them in my pocket. A pan fell behind me and I jumped out of my skin. Luckily for me, it was just a rabbit. Okay, that's it. Time for me to head out. I held the camera safely in my hand and exited the cottage the same way I entered. I was unable to try out my new camera until a few days after. I had to hide it away since my sister always, and I mean always, got into my stuff. I placed the first reel of film into the camera, and 8 orange lights at the top of the camera indicated that I had 8 shots. I stuck the other 2 rolls in my pocket. I hung my camera around my neck and held the Polaroid in my hand. I decided to head to the market, which was busiest on a Saturday, and it seemed as though the entire town was there. The market was not only loud, but it was quite animated with vendors inviting people to make purchases and customers haggling for a better price. I walked through the market snapping photos of vendors and residents of the town. I placed all the completed photos in an envelope and stuck them in my back pocket for safekeeping. I had completed 1 roll and had just placed the other into the camera when I felt a tug on my shirt. I looked down to see what it was. A little girl of around 5 years of age was looking up at me with her large brown eyes. "Can you please take a picture of me and my dog?" she asked, holding up a scrawny pup for me to see. "Sure, no problem. I would be honored," I said as I did a little bow and she giggled. I took the picture and she ran over to see the end results. I showed her the picture and her eyes lit up. "Would you like to keep it?" I asked. She nodded excitedly and I handed the picture to her. I watched as she ran over to a plump woman who was selling fish and showed her the picture. The little girl pointed in my direction and I gave a small wave and smiled. Over the next few days, a series of weird and unfortunate events took place that had the entire town buzzing. Mr. Randolph, the manager at the grocery store, fell asleep behind the wheel. The car crashed into a light pole and burst into flames. My gym teacher, Mr. Hazel, got into a freak parachuting accident. They said that some strange wind turbulence happened and that the strings of the parachute wrapped around his neck, and to make matters worse, his parachute got stuck in a tree. Then there was a third, fourth, fifth, and sixth death. All around were strange, unexplainable circumstances. The seventh death knocked the wind out of me. My face turned pale as I recognized the little girl from the market. The picture on the front page of the newspaper was the same picture of the little girl and the dog that I had taken at the market. The article said their house caught on fire, but even though they were able to save the house and rescue the family, the little girl and the puppy sadly had passed away. I had not looked at the pictures I took out that day. I ran to my room and opened my desk drawer where I kept the pictures and the envelope and the camera. I took out the pictures and spread them on my desk so that I could get a better view. They were all there. Every person that had died. I had pictures of them. This was just a coincidence. How could a camera be the cause of these deaths? I muttered. I decided to stick all of the pictures up on my bedroom wall in order of number and batch of film. I left a space where the little girl's picture was supposed to be. There were 16 people in total. I used a marker to cross off the people who had died. I placed my hand over my mouth in shock as I realized that the deaths took place in the order of how their pictures were taken. Just then, my mother shouted for me to come quickly, and she showed me the news channel. "Justin, we have just received word that employees and customers at Marigold's financial institution are being held hostage. Information is still sketchy, but stay tuned for more." I ran back to my room and looked at the pictures. I gasped. The next person on the list was Mrs. Walters. Mrs. Walters was our next-door neighbor. She was an elderly lady, and I helped take her dog for walks, and she and my mom would often go to the supermarket together. I ran back to the TV room and sat in front of the TV with my mom and sister as the news report unfolded. It was a few hours before the police had everything under control. One senior citizen, you guessed it, Mrs. Walters, needed to be rushed to the hospital. News reports said that the events of the robbery were too much for her, and she started complaining about chest pains after they were released from the hostage situation. The very next day, on the front of the newspapers was a picture of Mrs. Walters. She died the night before of a heart attack. In the short space of 2 weeks, 8 people from the village had died. I sat on my bed looking at the picture of Mrs. Walters when my sister came into my room and sat on my bed. "Is that a picture of Mrs. Walters?" she asked, pointing to the picture. "Yeah, it is," I said. "Can I see?" Jazzy pleaded. I handed the picture over to her and she looked it over. "What's wrong with the picture?" Jazzy asked, turning the picture in different angles to get a better view. "What do you mean?" I asked with raised eyebrows as I noticed Jazzy trying to take something off the picture. "What's that on Mrs. Walters' chest? You need to take better pictures, Gary," Jazzy said. "Jazzy," Mom called from downstairs. "Coming, Mom," Jazzy replied and ran out of my room, leaving me with a bewildered expression on my face. I looked closely at the picture and realized that Jazzy was right. There was a fuzzy imprint on the left side of Mrs. Walters' chest. I scrambled out of bed and searched my room for my magnifying glass. I finally found it in a box I had not unpacked yet. I took down the other 6 pictures from the wall and checked for clues. In every picture, there was a fuzzy image, every single one. Mr. Randolph's picture had flames. Mr. Hazel had a thin white line around his neck. The little girl had clouds of smoke around her. I needed to get rid of the camera, and quick. I grabbed the camera and ran into the forested area. I searched for the small logged cottage, but I couldn't find it. I stood, scratching my head. How does a small cottage just disappear into thin air? I used a stick, dug a hole, and placed the camera inside and covered it up. I wished I had never entered the cottage in the first place. After burying the camera, I dusted my hands and knees and headed home. When I arrived home, my mother said, "You left your camera on the kitchen table." I rushed to the kitchen, and there it was. The camera! "What the heck?" I exclaimed as I grabbed the camera. I searched through the kitchen cupboards until I found a hammer. I carried the camera outside and smashed it to pieces. I grabbed the pieces and dumped them into the trash can. I felt a bit relieved until I entered the kitchen to pack away the hammer, but there it was, the camera, with its 8 glowing orange lights glaring at me. Now, you would think that after that, I would stop trying to get rid of it, but I didn't. For the next 7 days, I tried everything under the sun to get rid of it. I even tried to burn it. Nothing. Then, one day, after my numerous attempts, it did not show up. Finally, victory is mine, I thought to myself as I did a victory dance. I was sitting at home one Saturday watching some movies. My sister and mother went on a picnic, and I had the house all to myself. That past week, 8 students from my class had been mauled in the woods from wolves after going on a camping trip. At least I didn't have the camera to worry about anymore, but the guilt of knowing if I left that camera where I found it, then maybe those 16 people would have been alive. I must have fallen asleep because the next sound I heard was click. My eyes popped open, and right in front of me was a grinning Jazzy holding a photo of me. "What are you doing?" I yelled at her as I grabbed the picture and the camera. She ran upstairs, and I heard a door close. All the lights were out on the camera. I had mixed feelings. The deaths would now stop, but now I was the last person on the list. I ran up the stairs to Jazzy's room. I inhaled deeply before knocking and slowly opening the door. Jazzy was laying on her bed, her head buried in the pillows. "Hey, Jazzy, sorry for getting so upset with you back there, but you know I don't like pictures." Jazzy just lay there silent. I sat next to her and touched her shoulder. "Can I see the pictures that you took with the camera?" Jazzy got up reluctantly without saying a word and opened her backpack and handed me the photos. The 7 photos were of her and Mom. A chill ran down my spine, and it felt as though all the oxygen in the room was gone. All I wanted was a picture, like the one Daddy had. "What do you mean? Dad had a picture like this?" I asked Jazzy, the fear rising in my voice. She nodded and walked over to her dresser. She opened one of the drawers and pulled out a picture and handed it to me. There he was, my dad, smiling in a picture. I looked closely at the picture and realized it had 3 red fuzzed marks on his chest. You see, my dad got mugged coming home from work. He put up a struggle and he got shot in the process. I wonder if Mom... I ran down the stairs. "Mom! Mom! Mom!" I shouted at the top of my lungs. My mother came running from the kitchen. "What's wrong, Gary?" my mom asked in a concerned voice. I showed her the picture of Dad. "Did you take this picture?" I asked. My mom took the picture and tears swelled up in her eyes. "No, but this was the last photo that was taken of him. He came home one day and said a young man asked him if he wanted to get his picture taken for a small price of $1. My mom gulped back the tears and continued. "You know how your father was. Always tried to help where he could." My heart sank. Who was this young man? Where did he get the camera? Did the camera find him as it found me? I wanted to tell my mom about everything that happened, but I didn't want her to live in fear. If you're watching this, be wary of people who approach you with Polaroid cameras asking to take your photo. To the young man who took my dad's photo, please.
Alright guys, this is the end of the video. If you enjoyed, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe with post notifications. And one more reminder, join my Discord server. Bye.